becoming better informed participants in the global community. On January 21st, Henry Louis Gates Jr. talks about finding our global roots. More information at worldaffairscounciljax.org. The North Florida TPO is dedicated to transportation planning, funding, clean fuels, and new technologies for a vibrant, resilient, and connected region. More information available at northfloridatpo.com. Baptist Health is a proud supporter of First Coast Connect. Baptist Health, committed to building a healthier community for all of us. More info at 202-4YOU or baptistjax.com.
This is WJCT News 89.9 Jacksonville. Up next, national and local news from NPR and the WJCT News team.
Support for First Coast Connect is provided in part by Baptist Health and North Florida TPO.
Good morning. I'm Ann Schindler, and this is First Coast Connect. Today, we have a somewhat shortened version of the program so we can bring you NPR's live special coverage of Jimmy Carter's state funeral at Washington National Cathedral. But first, a $365,000 payout to a victim of sexual abuse at a local high school. What that means for Duval School's already bleak budget situation. Later in the program, we get a mindful from New Age guru Dr. Deepak Chopra ahead of his Jacksonville appearance. We should note, we were scheduled to interview State Attorney Melissa Nelson, but she canceled earlier this morning. Her office indicated it's because they didn't like the questions that we included in a web preview of her interview that we planned to ask her. That's unfortunate, but of course our invitation to appear on the program remains open. So today, we begin with a major settlement by the Duval County School Board announced yesterday. Here to catch us up on the latest is Jacksonville Today education reporter Megan Malakote. Good morning, Megan.
Good morning, Ann.
So, Megan, let's start with the settlement. What did the school officials agree to Tuesday?
Yes, so on Tuesday evening at the school board meeting, the board voted to approve a $365,000 payout to the latest civil suit brought about the Douglas Anderson, former Douglas Anderson teacher, Jeffrey Clayton. Mm-hmm. Jeffrey Clayton, of course, was arrested almost 2 years ago and charged with lewd conduct with a student, and he's now in prison. So this was the sixth settlement that the district has agreed to since that time. 4 of those relate to Clayton.
And so this victim was the one that led to his arrest. Is that correct? The one that this settlement was regarding?
No, this is a different victim around the same time as the victim in the criminal complaint. But this is actually a different victim. The suit from the victim that led to the criminal complaint was settled in the first round of settlements.
Okay. And so this latest, as we said, it's a 3-figure settlement. It's a lot of money, but it's not the only payout. So how much cumulatively has the district so far settled in relation to these cases?
So the first set of settlements came from 3 victims, and that's the one that included the criminal complaint victim. That one was a combined total of $1.45 million. Then and that came, it was shortly after the sentencing hearing in June, some point in the summer. And then in August, the district settled with 2 more victims. And that settlement was a combined total of $120,000. And those complaints related to 2 other Douglas Anderson faculty members. The first was Corey Thayer, and the second was Nicholas Serenati. And then so this one is the 6th, and it's $365,000.
Do we have any sense as to whether that is sort of the end of the line in terms of the total cost?
In my reporting, I get the sense that it's not the end of the line, honestly. Of course, we have to wait until the records become available and the suits work their way through the legal process. But in talking with members of the community and just people who are connected to the situation, I get the feeling that it's not the last one.
What are you hearing from the community? I mean, at this school board meeting, was there a lot of discussion around this? Are people reacting to the settlement?
Yes, so there was in the public comment during the school board meeting before they voted to approve the settlement. Several of the comments did relate to this item that was on the agenda. And so there's a lot of discussion about it. Of course, the community since Clayton's arrest has been very disturbed by the information that continues to come out. And so there was one of the commenters mentioned a third-party investigation that the school board had said it would conduct shortly after Clayton's arrest in 2023, but nothing else has come out about that third-party investigation, so I'm honestly not even sure where they're at in that process.
They sort of promised that they would outsource this in order to get someone kind of with an objective viewpoint on what did or didn't happen.
That's right, because after, if you remember, after Clayton was arrested in 2023, many more complaints came out about Clayton, but also about other faculty members at Douglas Anderson. And so I think the community concern relates to why, why, because there's been seemingly a disproportionate number of complaints about this one school.
And so one of the complaint elements of this complaint was that the school district knew and didn't do what it should have done in the case of this student. And part of that is based on school records that show a history of complaints. So remind us what Jeffrey Clayton had been accused of in what period of time leading up to this.
That's right. So we have records from the school district that show that between 2006 and 2022, Clayton had been investigated at least 8 times. Like there's records that show that they opened an official investigation at least 8 times, and most of those complaints were substantiated. One or two of them was not, and most of them were related to sexual misconduct with students. One of them was related to that he wasn't wearing his COVID mask in the classroom during the COVID time period, but most of them were various forms of sexual misconduct towards students that he was inappropriately touching or inappropriately discussing their bodies and things like that, and making comments that made students very uncomfortable and were inappropriate.
And so what do those records show happened? They obviously have opened these investigations. I think a lot of people observing would think, how is it, possible that somebody could be accused 6 times of sexual misconduct with students and cumulatively still nothing happens?
That's a great question. I don't have an answer for that, but what happened, according to these records, is that he was given various forms of discipline throughout the last 20 years. So he had a couple of verbal reprimands in his file. He has a couple of written reprimands in his file, but he wasn't removed from the classroom and taken out of Douglas Anderson until his arrest in 2023.
Do we know if he was removed from the classroom at any point during those investigations or whether they just continued while he was continuing to teach?
Not according to the records. He wasn't. If he was, it doesn't show on the paperwork.
Yeah. If you're just joining us, we're talking to reporter Megan Malicote. She's been covering the settlement that the Duval County School District reached Tuesday, or announced Tuesday and approved Tuesday, with a former student at Douglas Anderson. It is just the latest in a series of payouts. If you'd like to join our conversation, you can join us. Call us at 904-549-2937. You can also email firstcoastconnect@wjct.org, or you can reach out on social media. So, Megan, this lawsuit claimed something that has come up before in terms of the school or the school district not acting quickly enough. You mentioned Corey Thayer. That was another teacher that was removed from Douglas Anderson, and we've talked a little bit about that. But what did his circumstance show in terms of the responsiveness of the school or the school district?
Right. So Corey Thayer's case is a little bit different because he was actually accused of forcing sex on a student in school during school hours, there at Douglas Anderson. And the full story took a while to come out, but initially the complaint was inappropriate touching and so forth, kind of similar to most of the complaints that seem to come out. And so in the first time that was brought to the district's attention was in 2015. And they just did not thoroughly investigate. It first went to JSO, and JSO kind of briefly investigated and then decided that it was better for the Duval Schools Police Department to investigate. So they briefly investigated, sent it over to the school district's professional standards office, and then the professional standards office let it drop there and said that the investigator it was assigned to was busy. The records literally say that he had other cases that were a higher priority. And then he left the district, and it seems to have fallen through the cracks at that point, and nothing became of it until after Clayton's arrest. The mother of the victim in that case emailed the school board again, remembering her daughter's experience, and said, "Hey, this is what happened." And at that point, it got attention from the school board, and it was investigated again briefly and then um, he was pulled from the classroom at that point, and then he was put back, and then the family again came and said, why is he still in the classroom when this had happened? And so at that point, the school district's professional standards office did a full investigation and interviewed the victim, and that's what the documents that we received recently show a sworn statement from the victim at that point with a court reporter saying the full extent of the of Thayer's actions, where she's accusing him of forcing sex on her.
And there's kind of an interesting dynamic. I mean, you have Duval County Schools settling these cases. You also have the school board itself, though, raising concerns. And it is, I would guess, a little bit of a difficult legal posture in some cases for their attorney, the school board's attorney, because while they're trying to, from a legal standpoint and a strategic standpoint, attempting to kind of work out a deal with these victims, the school board itself has been raising an alarm in some ways about the handling of it, which I would think would just sort of heap additional liability on the district and make these settlements more costly.
It could. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't speak to if it will, the legal implications of that. But it does. I agree. It does seem like that. And I think it's relevant to remember also that the school board changes every 2 years. The makeup of the board is constantly in flux when you're talking about a 20-year period of
Because they have
of
staggered
conduct.
4-year
That's right.
terms.
They have staggered 4-year terms, and so every 2 years, the board changes a little bit. And so the board that approved the settlement this week for the $365,000 settlement is a different board, largely, than the board that approved the previous 1.45 million, just essentially a couple of months ago. And so some of the newer board members are drawing more attention to these things, like you say. But yeah.
And Duval County Schools is the target. I mean, we know that you said Jeffrey Clayton is now in jail. He's serving a 10-year prison sentence for this plea that he took regarding the lewd and lascivious touching of a minor. And um, Corey Thayer is no longer in the classroom. He was never charged with any
No, he's not
crime.
been charged with a crime. And until our reporting a couple of weeks ago, his teaching license was even still fully in good standing and active. When our reporting came out about the full extent of the allegations that he's facing,
And that was news to you and to the victim, right? Because they, in their settlement with Corey Thayer, understood that he was going to lose his teaching license.
right, that was part of what they understood to be part of the process that they went through to come to the terms of agreement in the settlement, was that he would lose his license because they are very interested in him not repeating these crimes, and so it was important to
And we
them.
should say they aren't necessarily
Right, right,
crimes,
right. Thank you. Yes, and
but accusations that were of inappropriate conduct.
right. Thank you. And so in talking with the victim's mother in that case, one of the most important things to them was that he, um, lose his teaching license as part of the settlement, and so they understood that that was going to be part of it. I have not, of course, was not part of the mediation. I don't know exactly what the terms of agreement were, but it seems in talking with several different people involved, it does seem like a pretty common thread that people who were part of that process understood that to be part of it. Um,
And as a result of some of the reporting that you've done, I mean, the school board has now asked the state district Department of Education to reopen their examination of Corey Thayer and to look at his teaching license. Is that right?
right, and so the Education Commissioner Manny Diaz, I guess, was alerted to this um, by one of our school board members, I think, and asked for Thayer's license to be put on administrative notice, meaning that basically it's flagged. And so if another district were to want to hire him, it would show up immediately.
hmm So, talk about how this settlement is coming at a time of really a constrained budget, some really difficult conversations that the school district is having about closing community schools um, and cutting back on all kinds of other things because they've got a $1 billion budget gap.
Uh, right. So they're trying to shave $100 million off the budget for the coming year. Um, and they closed a handful of schools in November. They voted to close them at the end of the year, and the savings for that's about $3 million a year. But if you add up these settlements, they've spent almost $2 million on settlements in the last 6 months. Um, so yes, it does come and it's an unfortunate comparison to draw to note that these settlements are costing the district a great deal of money that they don't have.
We've got a call from Mary in Arlington. Mary Ann, good morning. Go ahead.
Hi, good morning. I'm sorry that I tuned in a little bit late. I usually listen to you when we are on the way to school. My question to the reporter is, the school district did their investigations. Was DCF and the police ever notified to do their own investigations in regards to these sexual contacts and sexual assaults of minors?
Thanks, Mary Ann. I mean, I guess we should say a couple of things. One is that they're obviously different teachers, and so they were all handled a little bit differently. Um, but start with the DCF question because we know that teachers are mandatory reporters. Everybody that deals in that school system is essentially a mandatory reporter. So if they hear an allegation of sexual misconduct, they are required by law to report that allegation. Did that happen?
Right. Um, from what I can tell, in some cases it did, and in some cases it did not. It does seem like there's a line between the case when Clayton was arrested, where DCF was notified in that case. The court documents show that the Clay County Sheriff's Office was initially involved with DCF at that point, and then they determined that it needed to go over to JSO, and so it went over to JSO, and Clayton was arrested after that. But some of the cases, it seems like DCF was not notified. It's hard to find records about DCF because that is a necessarily confidential records typically. But that's a great question, and it it seems like the answer is probably it depends.
And the school, this this was, as she asked, this was reported to the school. The school, in some cases, passed this along to JSO or the sheriff's office, but ultimately they have their own school police.
They do. It's separate from JSO, and so the Duval Schools Police Department is the most likely investigating body for these types of.
And that's been a little problematic in the past, as we know that there was a really scathing grand jury report that found that the police weren't turning over really significant um, reports of crimes that were occurring on campus.
Right, right, and
And we don't know if these were necessarily a part of that.
no, it's hard to know which ones were part of which, but yeah.
Yeah. And so you said your reporting shows this may not be the end of the payouts. What kind of reporting are you working on next? Like, what should we be looking for in Jacksonville today?
I think that there's more to do to report this story, and so the community at large seems to have a question of how did it get to this point, and is it Douglas Anderson unique in this? And
Yeah.
so I'm looking into that.
All right. Well, you are known for some really intense public records requests. I'm sure there'll be more to drop in the coming weeks and months. Megan Malicote, thank you so much for being here. Back. Well, he's been called the New Age Super Sage, and he's won millions of adherents with his message of mindfulness and self-care. I'm joined now by author and alternative medicine guru, Dr. Deepak Chopra. Welcome to the program.
Thank you, Ann. Thanks.
So, Dr. Chopra, you're going to be in Jacksonville on January 15th as part of the Florida Forum Speaker Series. We're talking a little more than a week before that. And one of the reasons we're talking today is because you're about to embark on a silent retreat. Tell us a little bit about what that is. How often do you do those and what purpose do they serve?
Well, I used to do them twice a year and then once a year, and I'm getting back into trying to do them twice a year. So for about a week to 10 days, I take off from everything digital. So no emails, no text messages, no TV, no entertainment, no radio, no books. And I spend the week in total solitude and silence. I have one meal a day. And I reflect on my life and on my next chapter. I'm now 78 years old. So in my tradition, there are 4 chapters. They're called ashrams. First 25 years is education. Second 25 years is fame and fortune. Third 25 years is giving back. And now I'm in my fourth 25 years, which is meant to be for self realization, spiritual enlightenment, and preparation for death.
Those 4
So that,
stages sound great. I guess that's if everything sort of goes as planned. Is that right? Not
yes, it doesn't matter. It's just a template for what. If you're fully awake, then every season is the best season in your life.
So let's talk about being fully awake. I mean, one of the things that you espouse is that basically our minds can control and kind of really help determine our health, our reality in some ways. Certainly, our perception of the world. And explain what you mean when you talk about our perception shaping reality. Also, just being very specific to our viewpoint as a culture or even as a species.
Yeah, so actually, it's not the mind, it's our awareness. And the mind is a particular modified expression of what we call awareness or consciousness. So, awareness by itself is a field of experience. Right now, you're having an experience, you're speaking to me. So, where is this experience happening? And this has been called the mind body problem for thousands of years. And some people would say this experience is happening on your screen. Some people would say it's happening in your eyes. The experience of seeing is happening in the eyes. Some people would say it's happening in the brain. But actually, you will find no experience of color, shape, sound, texture, flavor, or smell anywhere in any location. There's no color red in my brain or yours. There's no image of me in your brain or yours. There's no image of the world in your brain or anyone else's brain. Uh, in other words, there's no experience in anything that we call physical. What we see in the brain are called biological correlates, neural correlates in their form of neurochemicals. So you're not experiencing neurochemicals, you're experiencing the sound of somebody that you identify as Deepak Chopra. So, where is this experience happening? And the only reasonable answer is it's happening in awareness or consciousness.
I think I understand how that awareness could certainly help with things like health, mindfulness. But how does that sense of perception apply to real world challenges? When we talk about war, pollution, the condition of the planet, the political scene.
Very good, because those challenges that you just mentioned are actually, if we don't address them, we are sleepwalking to extinction. Climate change, economic and social injustice, chronic disease, war, terrorism, nuclear weapons, drones, mechanized ways of killing ourselves and killing each other, and the destruction of species. All this is because we are sleepwalking to extinction. There's no creativity in our political world, in our religious world, in our business world. If we had the fundamental creativity that comes from actually identifying with your spirit, which is the field of infinite creativity and fundamental reality, we are at a crossroads. One road leads to extinction. And, anytime I post something about climate change on social media, a lot of people get upset with me. And yet the evidence is there for climate change. Every time we talk about mechanized death and war, we think that's the only solution to solve our problems. It's been recycling since medieval times. So we have medieval tribal minds and modern capacities for self destruction, which is a perfect recipe for extinction. And, if there are 2 trillion galaxies, then it doesn't matter. The dinosaurs went extinct and we emerged as an evolutionary experiment. So
So,
maybe we are failing as an evolutionary species,
so
or
I mean,
maybe we
I mean, ideally, if people were mindful and not sleepwalking to extinction, as you say, we would be avoiding some of those. But practically speaking, how do you encourage people to like cope with that element of the world, those realities, given that the whole world is not in alignment with your
Well,
suggestions?
if we are in denial, then that's the first step. The first step is to recognize these as facts. The fact of war as a failed way to solve problems, the fact of terrorism as a failed way to solve creatively social and economic and whatever injustice we are having. So, first is to recognize that medieval minds and modern capacities don't go together. The next step is how can we effect change? And I'm a big fan of technology and AI. I have my own digital Deepak or whatever you call it, deepakchopra.ai. I've written a book on AI. I'm in conversation with Sam Altman, who is, the CEO of AI, Open AI. I go to the World Economic Forum, which I'm going after I come to Florida. I attend these conferences where people get together, including the United Nations, to get in touch with the creative solutions. And the fact is, we have creative solutions for climate change. We have creative solutions for conflict resolution. Doesn't matter whether it's Gaza or anywhere else. Economic solutions for social and economic injustice. We have actually creative solutions to repair the biosphere, to even actually change our gene activity. We have gene editing coming up. We have messenger RNA. The technologies are there. We are not having the right conversations, and we are not emotionally invested because we are sleepwalking. As I said, we've become biological robots with medieval minds and modern technologies.
So you're coming to town, to Jacksonville, to an event that's hosted by the Women's Board of Wolfson Children's Hospital. It's a fundraising effort for their new pediatric critical care transport vehicles. What, though, will you be talking about in Jacksonville? What can people expect to hear from you?
I intend to be very practical, so I'm going to talk about, first of all the innovations in medicine and science that have occurred in the last maybe 2 decades, from artificial intelligence to messenger RNA to neuroplasticity to the microbiome to epigenetics. And I'm also going to show how technology can actually help us address these problems. But addressing these problems is not enough. We need an emotional and spiritual awakening to actually be emotionally invested in these issues of understand that what we call the environment or the biosphere is our extended body. Without trees, we wouldn't breathe, and nor would they. The earth is recycling as our body. The rivers and oceans are our circulation, and the air is our breath. So we have these dualistic words. There's me and the rest of the universe. In fact, the entire universe is contained in you as a biological organism, and you and the environment are at a deeper level one reality. Unless we wake up to that experience emotionally and spiritually, all the science and all the technology is going to be useless.
Well, Dr. Deepak Chopra, I know it'll be a fascinating appearance when you're here in Jacksonville on the 15th. Thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Anne, for having me. It's a privilege.
And we'll be back in just a minute. Well, we were talking to Deepak Chopra there. His appearance next Wednesday at the Jacksonville Center for the Performing Arts will be moderated by Jaguars owner Shad Khan. If you're interested in attending, tickets are available at thefloridaforum.com. We're now going to join NPR's special live coverage of Jimmy Carter's state funeral service at the National Washington